Mhm.
Welcome to another episode of the Blissful Life podcast with your host, Samantha Gregory. And today I have my guest, Miss Monet Farr Cole. She is going to be chatting with us about grief and how to heal grief, the different modalities, because quiet as it's kept, grief is a part of life and it is a part of who we are, what we have to experience every now and then. And so she is going to share with us her take on grief, the art of letting go, and how to heal well. Welcome, Monet. Thank you so much for being on the Blissful Life.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation with you. And I love the title you selected because it really is an art
Yeah.
to this work of letting go and then allowing your heart to heal. But, just to tell your audience and you a little bit more about me, the work I do, and how I got here. I actually started as an image consultant many years ago. And so I
Okay.
work with women on the outer
Mhm.
appearance. And I realized that, they were still struggling with carrying it off and, being confident in their look. And I realized that it's the inner work that still
Mhm.
needed to be done. And so I got certified as a life coach. And then as my own life began to unfold and continued to unfold, actually, I had experienced different losses in my life. My mom died. And that was jarring because, I think that no matter what the relationship is with your mom, once they leave this earth, it leaves you feeling more vulnerable than
Mm.
before. And so my foundation really was shook. And thankfully, I had family and friends to help me through that difficult time. Had some other losses in our family, experienced miscarriage, a big move from New York to Atlanta, divorce after a 23-year marriage. My dad experienced dementia and then passed. But then it was the death of my life partner at that time, who was, he was a pet detective. He was, unfortunately, he was one of the first responders at 9/11, but he otherwise had a very healthy life, but he succumbed to pancreatic cancer and passed away. And it was that loss
Mm.
that left me in a really dark place because
Yeah.
for the first time, I really was pretty ambivalent about moving forward. First of all, I didn't know what moving forward looked like because
Sure.
my future was tied up in him, and with him not there, I didn't really even know how to move forward, and, you're bogged down by the feelings of grief, so you don't even have the energy, but, it
Mhm.
was a very dark place that I hadn't visited before, and I knew I didn't wanna stay there. It was not
Yes.
gonna be good. So I got some help, and I was introduced to something called the grief recovery method, and that's what I use with my clients, and so it's a process of understanding grief in a different way, having some tools to use so that you can process the grief, let go of the grief and the pain, and not to say that you'll never be sad again. You'll
Sure.
miss that person, that thing, that relationship, whatever it is that you're grieving, but you're not gripped by it. And then I
Mhm.
help them move forward because that's part of the journey too, right? You don't wanna just be stuck where you even if you do the processing, you don't wanna just be stuck there, you wanna be able to move forward, and so that's what I do now. I am dedicated to helping mostly women. I do have some male clients, but it's mostly helping women through that process and, just understanding grief in a new way because it is far-reaching, far more reaching than I think any of us realize.
Absolutely. Wow.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing your experience, your journey. That is pretty intense. And I'm glad you've gotten on the other side of it and you're able to help other people through it because you truly understand what it is to go through a loss, what it is to go through grief, and how to manage it. Because I don't think you ever really get rid of it. You learn how to manage it. So I think
Mm.
that's just really profound. And I want to kind of backtrack. You mentioned being a image consultant and helping so many women and realizing or and seeing that they even though they have this new look, it wasn't embodied on the inside. And that reminded me of this book I read, the Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz, who was the plastic
Mhm.
surgeon, and he was like doing all this amazing work on people, but the inside they still felt ugly. They still felt,
Yeah.
unworthy. And so I'm curious about that, but and of course we're going to go and talking about grief, etc., but how that informed your work. Were they dealing with a lot of loss in terms of death, or were there different types of loss that they were experiencing and really couldn't make the connection with their new look and the internalized or their identity?
Mhm. So it's interesting because how it really showed itself was in a lack of confidence.
Mhm.
But we all know that when our hearts are still healing or we haven't dealt with some issues, whether they're past, traumas from our childhood or something recent as divorce, because a lot of my clients were starting new, they were starting fresh. They had either, were now empty nesters and in a new phase of their life, or, in a new job where, a new career, or they'd gotten divorced and now they're out there dating again. And
Mhm.
so all these changes in our lives is what can sometimes cause grief.
Right.
Grief is not just set aside for death. It's
Mhm.
any change, any major changes in our life, we miss what was. And if
Yes.
we don't deal with that, it can kind of, we just start packing those rocks in a knapsack. And before you know
Mhm.
it, that knapsack is full and you're
Mhm.
stuck. How many of us know people just kind of stuck,
Yeah.
right? Not
Yeah.
moving forward, telling the same story over and over and over and over again.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's what I was seeing, but
Mhm.
I had not put together the grief piece of it back
Okay.
then. I
Okay.
just saw it as a lack of confidence and, being in a new place, this new station in life, and just not knowing how to own it, right? Just
Mhm.
really
Mhm.
own it.
Absolutely. Good. I like that. I like that because I see it. I often see it in myself, with
Mhm.
other people, noticing it and being aware of it. I think people feel like the outward appearance changing is going to change everything else for them, but
Mhm.
it's like a sad realization that it doesn't happen that way. You really have to change yourself from the inside out, and that's really where it's going to stick. And you're going to see that the outward change is just the icing on top, the cherry on top of this
Yeah.
newness that you have that you're embodying because you've done the work. You've let
Mhm.
go and you've
And
allowed
I
yourself to
find
breathe.
and they're both important.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
both important.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So with the letting go part,
Mhm.
even whether it's a relationship or a parent that has passed away or even gone into dementia like your dad did, you know, how I'm really big on allowing the stages of grief to happen. So, how do you work through or help your clients work through even recognizing that they need to grieve first and then going through that process of grief?
Mhm. So first, I do wanna say that it's my belief in the work that I do and the research that we found is that so the psychiatrist who came up with the 5 stages of grief,
Mhm.
Kubler-Ross, she developed that for people that were terminally ill,
Mm.
but somehow it morphed into being the stages of grief for a griever, and
Ah,
I don't ascribe to that because
okay.
we may not have all of those feelings.
Sure.
And you need to honor what feelings you have and honor your timeline. And so, unfortunately, some people, and it's not that that's the worst thing in the world to think of the 5 stages, but it can be detrimental when people come to you and say, "So, are you on stage 2 yet? Oh, no,
Mhm.
you haven't gotten. Oh, you have to make sure you go through stage 2 before you go to." No, our grief journeys are not linear. They're
Mhm.
not always the same. We are so unique, and the relationships or whatever the losses that we're grieving, those are very unique relationships, right? So I'm the same person, but I might not grieve my mom the way I would grieve my dad. Those are
Sure.
2 completely different relationships.
Mhm.
So, that's the first thing.
Okay.
But, you wanna honor whatever feelings you have and what come up, and so emotional honesty is, like, one of the cornerstones of my work, and it's so important that we do these gut checks and
Mhm.
check in with ourselves and really understand what it is we're feeling, because that's where the power comes from. If
Okay.
you know what you're feeling and you start to explore it and really get to the nuts and bolts of it, then
Mhm.
that's when you can say, okay, I understand what I'm feeling now. I'm feeling fear. I'm feeling, discouragement, whatever it is that you're feeling. And I understand why I'm feeling it. And now, okay, what do I want to do about it? Now you
Mhm.
can have
Mhm.
intentional action instead
Sure.
of being at the effect of, you know, some other, actions that you put out there, just acting on the emotion instead of really being intentional.
Okay, okay. I like that, and thank you for that update and correction about the 5 stages of grief, because I did not know that it really involved a dying person. But that
Mhm.
makes a lot of sense, and it definitely kinda shifts, especially in my mind, because again, I'm learning like the audience is learning about this process, and having that new have a new light shed on the stages of grief and honoring how you feel, which I think has a big part to do with self care and self awareness. And like you mentioned, self honesty. I feel like
Mhm.
that even self honesty, that piece right there is so huge, which we get so caught up in and I don't know, committed to the lies we tell ourselves, and
Mhm.
that kind of just it runs a thread throughout our lives. So we're not willing to just face what is the truth about who I am, how I'm feeling, and being able to really sit in that and accept that. And I
Yeah.
think we get, like you mentioned, being stuck. Do you think there's a correlation between being stuck and the lack of self honesty?
Absolutely, absolutely. And so recently, I went through, something I'll share briefly because, like I said, I could talk about this all day,
Sure.
but I won't, I promise. Okay. So recently, given the atmosphere in our country, I really was struggling with anxiety.
Hmm.
And I felt the need, as a thought leader in grief, I really felt the need to get out there and say something.
Sure.
But I had to give myself permission to feel whatever it is that I'm feeling and
Hmm.
understand it, right? Because a lot of times what we want to do is we want to go immediately into self-soothing.
Right.
So if we
Okay.
self-soothe, we don't really give our emotions the breath and the space to be what they really are and to face them as ugly as they may be. I'm a grief recovery specialist and I'm feeling anxious and I'm feeling fear and yes,
Hmm.
that is what I was feeling, and I had to sit with those feelings and really understand them and not go into the self-soothing and not going into the pushing them away, because that is what gets us stuck, because if you don't process them, they
Hmm.
sit there and they fester, and so that bag I talked about, that knapsack
Right.
with the
Yeah.
rocks, you didn't pull any rocks out of there. You didn't pull any. You're still carrying those rocks. And
Mhm.
eventually they're gonna stop you, and that is what gets us stuck because we haven't processed the grief and the feelings, so they still are there. They're still
Mhm.
weighing us down. They're still affecting how we move, right? If I don't understand the fear I'm feeling, how can I move through it? I'm
Right.
gonna still have that fear. I'm just
Mhm.
gonna push it away and say, "You know what? God's gonna take care of me. I'm gonna be good. I'm good." And I am, I'm a believer. I am a
Sure.
believer.
Sure.
But I know that I gotta do my part. I have to
Mhm.
do my part, and my part is in processing these feelings and understanding them so that I can move forward really without the weight of them. That's
Mhm.
so crucial. It's crucial. And in this time of, what we talk about, this toxic positivity, it's a dangerous game.
Mm, mhm.
It's a dangerous game because it's not real. And
Right.
so you go back home or you get off the camera or you finish posting and you go back to really the truth of how you're feeling,
Mhm.
and there's no
Right.
movement.
Absolutely. And you mentioned not processing how you feel and going immediate or even being honest about how you feel and moving immediately into self-soothing.
Mhm,
And some people would mask that as self care because I'm taking care of myself and I'm doing this, I'm doing that. But
mhm.
there, again, that honesty piece is not there. How do you really feel? And when will you be willing to face the feelings?
Mhm.
That's the hard question.
Mhm.
And it even begs the question, why are we so afraid of
Mhm.
our feelings? And
Mm.
how do we get even past that? Because it's almost like the feelings make you feel almost feels like death itself, so and that if you feel it too much, you're just gonna implode, explode, or whatever, so talk a little bit about that piece.
Yeah, I'll I always try to, bring my own stories in because, just to
Mhm,
give a real life experience. So that last death that I experienced, right? I was in grief counseling as well as the grief recovery method. And so my therapist at the time, she's like, "Go lay down and just let yourself cry." I was like, "No, I will never
mhm,
get up if I just give into this feeling, I'll never get up again." But I
mhm,
did. I laid in that bed and I cried and I cried and I cried and I cried, and
mhm.
guess what? I got
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
I got up, so I think that we just are so afraid of these emotions, but
Mhm,
it's not the emotions, and we talk about good feelings and bad feelings, there are none. They're
mhm.
all they just
Yeah,
are. They
yeah.
are what you feel, and they alone cannot do anything. It's the actions you take as a result. So if you can sit with this deep sadness and
Mhm,
understand it and give it some breath and really just let it have its way for a moment. And you don't have to just say, okay, I'm gonna just sit there and never do my work because you still have to be, at work and you still have to take care of
mhm,
things in your life. But if you say, okay, I'm gonna give myself this 30 minutes today and just feel whatever it is that I feel, write about it, let it out, right?
mhm,
People have different ways of releasing. So you want to
mhm,
find what works for you. Talking to my friends was very helpful, talking to my therapist, doing my work. Those were the ways that helped me. Journaling is also a big
mhm,
part of my process. But to let it out and then eventually to say, okay, what am I going to do about it? I don't want to be sad every day, all day. So what am I gonna do? What are some of the things that I can do now to
mhm,
reintroduce joy into my life? But real and on a real level, right? Not
mhm,
on this, level of I'm not dealing with this. I don't have time. It's
mhm.
gonna catch up to you if you don't
Sure,
deal with it. So then
absolutely.
be intentional though about, okay, what do I want to do going forward? So it's not the feelings that are so dangerous.
Mhm.
It's what we do with them or how we bury them. That's the danger. Because
Yeah.
one day you wake up and you just lose you lose it. And you're like,
Mm,
why did I just go off like that? Why did I just, have these nasty words, with my family or
mhm,
my friend, why did I do that? Why did I erupt? But that's
mhm.
because you didn't deal with it intentionally.
Right, right. And that's so powerful in terms of the importance of allowing it, allowing that those
Mhm,
feelings to come up,
mhm,
allowing it to come through and to release it. Because I'm really big on, yes, feel your feelings, process them, and then release them, let them
mm,
go.
mm,
And this past summer, I think I cried the most this summer that I've ever cried in my entire life, and it wasn't even an intentional thing. And you
mhm,
talked about how much you just bury the knapsack you carry, all the things that have just stuffed down, stuffed down. And I've been in the process of, dealing with emotions, dealing with issues, dealing with trauma, dealing with all these things, but I never dealt with grief
mm,
because so many things happened from like when I was in elementary school. One of my good friends, she ended up getting tragically hit by a car because we used to ride the bus, city bus, and we'd all run up to the bus stop and all
mhm,
that good stuff. And that day, my mom picked me up, and it was a
mhm,
rainy day, and she was crossing the street, and she ended up getting hit by a drunk driver.
mm,
And it was from my mind, my 9-year-old mind, to process that.
mhm, mm,
It was too much, and my friend had passed away, but I never grieved like I feel like
mm,
I
mm,
probably should have. But this past summer, for whatever reason, she popped in my head, and when I tell you I cried over that, I cried and I
mm,
cried and I cried over the fact that my friend had died like that,
mm,
and that
mm,
I didn't see it. I heard so many of my friends saw it happen,
Mm,
but I was saved from that, and it was just like, and then, a good pastor friend passed away. I cried and cried. So I was just like, "Where is all this coming from?" But it was because I was giving myself the space
mm,
to
mm,
remember and then allow and then just be, and I thought I wouldn't stop crying, but I
mhm,
did, you
mhm.
know, by letting those, and I've even looking back at that, I was like, "Wow, that was part of my radical self-care, to allow
Mhm.
all those feelings to come up,
Yes.
to allow that stuff to just bubble up, to process it, to release it, and then just, and it was like a weight was lifted that I didn't even know I had."
Yes. So many people need to hear this conversation
Yeah.
because we're talking about really radical self-care in a way
Yes.
that people don't necessarily think about or talk about. And so I'm
Absolutely.
really thankful that you shared that because that is the absolute truth. That is the absolute
Yeah.
truth. And the other thing I do want to, just kind of mention at least is we also need to take care with how we talk about to children about grief because we
Yeah.
we're very protective. We don't want them to feel bad. We don't want them to cry. We don't want them to feel sad. But you know what?
Mhm.
They get to, and they
Yeah.
should have the ability to be honest about how they're
Mhm.
feeling and let it out and talk about it, feel safe,
Mhm.
and also, supported in having honest conversation about how I feel. Grandma didn't go to sleep. She didn't go to sleep, she died, and
Mhm.
she's
She
not coming
died.
back, and how do we feel about that? We're sad and, you know,
Mhm.
really and, so we have a whole program for children, but
Okay.
we really do wanna be really intentional about giving them the space too, to process their
Absolutely.
grief so they're not adults crying about their friend, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because when I tell you I was shocked that that happened that
Yeah.
way, I was like, "What?" That was
But
over.
think about it, how devastating is that?
Yes.
That is a
Yeah.
devastating loss. Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, it certainly
absolutely.
is.
Yeah.
And even recently, I learned of a friend that is in hospice now, and he was a friend of me and my family, my kids, and in talking to my high functioning autistic son about it,
Mhm.
because allowing him and letting him know it's okay to be sad, it's okay to
Mhm.
really appreciate that person's life and
Mhm.
really understand that death is a part of life and that we don't have to be afraid of it. We don't have to be hiding from it or anything like that. And it's okay to express how we feel when a
Mm.
person that we know, we love, we were close to passes away. So even
Yeah,
talking to
good for
people
you.
who, he has intense emotions
Mm,
because of who he is, but helping him not be overwhelmed by that, but
mhm,
still temper it so that he understands and he can process it without the emotional outburst and everything, but in
right.
a healthy way for him. So,
Mhm,
again,
mhm.
teaching him
Hey,
it's okay.
mom.
It's okay, um, but not enough people are aware of or willing to go through the process of grieving things that
Mm,
didn't happen in their life that they wish had happened, relationships that ended
mhm.
prematurely,
Yeah.
all those things. Because I'm into toxic relationship recovery, and part of that
Mhm,
is grieving that
mhm,
relationship and
mhm.
undergirding it with self-care,
Yeah.
undergirding it because you need that in order to get through that process of healing. So,
Mhm,
talk about the letting
mhm.
go piece, how we let go and begin to thrive again.
Yeah. So it's important that you process the grief like we've been talking about. But
Mhm,
it's also really important after you are able to go through either, like the grief recovery method or whatever it is that you use to process your grief and release the pain of the grief, to
mhm,
now sit with yourself because we are forever changed by the significant losses in our lives, the more traumatic ones. We're
mhm,
changed. We're no longer that same person. So it's so important to sit with who you are in this moment and then
mhm,
decide, okay, what kind of life do I now want to create as I move forward? Really just feeling the freedom
Mhm.
to choose new things for your life, a new path, you know, or to stay on the same path.
Sure.
But you get to choose, and it should be really a very intentional, thought through process, and, you know, I will admit, I skipped over that process because
Mm.
after my life partner passed, and I did my work, and I felt good again, and I was ready to go out and meet people and just re-enter life again, but I didn't sit with who I am now in this
Mm.
moment. So I was still making choices from who I was
Okay.
and not from who I am. And not that they're completely 2 different people. It's just that
Sure.
there are these nuances, right? I'm more self-contained now than I've ever
Mhm.
been. You know, I'm really okay with me and by being by myself and
Mhm.
entertaining myself and enjoying my company, you know, than I ever was before. And that's just
Right.
a nuance. That doesn't make me a
Sure.
completely different person, but from this space, I'm much more independent, and I'm gonna
Mhm.
make choices. I should make choices that encourage that independence and support that independent side of me. I'm also a woman who now I because I was an only child and,
Mm.
you know, other issues in my childhood, I, you know, surrounded myself in friends and family, and I was always full of activities and people were in my life, and I was talking on the phone all the time, and I was going out, and no, no more.
Mhm. Mhm.
No more. I don't need all of that stimulation anymore. So I can live a life where I just have, you know, interactions from time to time with family and friends. You know, I don't need as quite as much stimulus. So just knowing those little nuances, changes about yourself is
Mhm.
important in the letting go and the moving forward. And the moving forward, please, I hope people will just really take away from this as well as important as processing our grief and releasing the pain is the really giving yourself permission to move forward and create
Mhm.
the life you love. Create your
Um,
biggest, best life, regardless of what life gives you, because living life abundantly does not mean you will not experience sorrow or pain,
mhm.
or, being, disappointed, right?
Right.
It doesn't even mean a long life, to be honest. It just
Mhm.
means a life full, right? A
Mm.
full life of the things you love and living in your purpose. So that's what I really encourage people. You can have that no matter what you've gone through in life. It's just a
Mhm.
matter of finding the help, the support, and the processes that can help you get there.
I love that because creating that new life because you are a changed person, because of that experience, I think is such a very crucial and important part of the process.
Mm,
And so, thank you for sharing that. And I guess giving people permission, to move forward with your life and do it in a way that is meaningful for you. That is so that you can live in fullness and not depletion because a loss of a person or a situation is a kind of a depleted part of yourself. So thank you for sharing that. And I know that you have your program, but
mhm,
what you also have something that you like to share with the audience as
mhm,
well as just share where we can find you on social media
mhm.
and how they can connect with you if they want to go through your um, grief recovery process.
So I think we can share the link
Mhm.
in the comments.
Yes.
So I have a link for a program that I have as a complimentary program for your viewers, and it's the 30-day Heal Your Heart Challenge, and it's a series of journal prompts and inspiration to just get them started on really starting to do some self-exploration and gain
Mhm.
some self-awareness to be able to start moving forward in their lives or to heal their hearts from whatever it is that they may be grieving or going through or experiencing. I also have a website that's newparadigmsgriefrecovery.com. It's a mouthful. But again, I'm sure we can share it
Yeah.
in the and I'm on Instagram at New Paradigms Grief Recovery.
Okay. Excellent, excellent. Well, I will definitely have all that information in the description below. So
Mhm,
tap in, connect with Monet, and be honest about where you are in your life, whether it's a loss of a person or a loss of a job or a loss, any loss that you have. It's important to go through a process of grief is and then letting it go so that you can create the life that you love. And radical self care is a part of that process. And I think, again,
mhm,
it's foundational to making sure that you are supported because you need to support yourself emotionally through that process. So, any last words, Monet, to share with anyone going through this process and just how they can come out even better because of it?
mhm. So I'm gonna leave you with an exercise.
Okay.
So it's called a gut check. So if they could just start here, I think it would really help and make a difference. So what I share with my clients, and I have programs. So I have a 6-week program. I have one-on-one coaching, and then I also have a membership program.
Hmm.
But what I share with my clients is this gut check. And so what you want to do is when you wake up in the morning, you want to do a scan. How am I feeling? What am I feeling? And if you need to expand your emotional words, I have an emotional wheel word for you. But,
Okay.
okay, so I'm feeling a little anxious and a little fearful today. So you figure out how you're feeling. Then the next step is to ask yourself, why am I feeling that way? Did
Mhm.
something happen? And so you kind of scan the last day or two and just see if you can find what happened. So, oh yeah, I had a conversation with my daughter, she talked about, how she's a little afraid for the kids, and so
Mhm,
it kind of,
mhm,
spread to me. Okay, so now I've asked myself what I'm feeling, why I'm feeling it, and now it's like, is there a belief tied to this feeling? Oh yeah, yeah. I have this mom belief that I'm supposed to take care of her and her adult self.
mhm.
I believe she can't really, do it out there on her own. And then, okay, then you ask yourself, is that belief true? Mm, no, it's not true. And then
Mhm,
the last step is, okay, what am I gonna do about it? I'm just gonna be here for a soft landing if she needs me. I'm gonna have
mhm,
I'm gonna encourage her to make the best decisions for her and the kids and know that she's well, and I'm gonna continue to pray for her and, like I said, just be that soft landing if she needs me. So then you take the intentional action. But see, you can't do any of that if you didn't do the scan to figure out what you're feeling.
right,
I
right.
feel like the gut check is something I use every day, not every day, I might miss
Mhm,
a day or 2, but certainly I do it to check in and make sure that, I'm aware of what's
mhm,
going on inside of me.
mhm. I love that gut check, self check in to see how you're
Mhm,
feeling, how you're doing. That is important to, I think, even the optimal life, an optimal day.
mhm,
Because you are grounded in that, in
mhm.
yourself and your feelings, and you won't. It's harder to let the winds of life move you when you are grounded. So, thank you for sharing that with me, for sharing it with the audience, and for being on the Blissful Life podcast. I have really enjoyed this conversation, Monet.
Oh, I have to. Thank you so much for having me and having this conversation. It's been
You're
great.
very welcome. And for all of you listening, please make sure that you like this episode, give us a nice review, and subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. We really want you to be a part of the Blissful Life community. And if you have any questions, comments, leave them in the comment section below, and we'll do our best to answer those for you. In the meantime, take care and please live the most blissful life you can because you absolutely deserve it. Take care.